Welcome back in for another edition of Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen, joined as always by Coach Guy Suttle, and sitting in with us this week, Paul Foster. Each week we talk about our 4 high school teams here in Cleveland County. We'll look at college football along with Gardner-Webb University, and then we'll finish up with the NFL and the Carolina Panthers, although I think we've already agreed that we probably don't want to spend any time on the Carolina Panthers this week. 2 county games this past week. You got to love that. It's always fun to see the county matchups, and 2 pretty solid wins for Crest and Kings Mountain over the weekend. But let's start with that Burns and Crest game. About to flash back a week. Let's start with that Burns and Kings Mountain game on Friday night. And shout out to Lucas Ward, Kings Mountain student that's working through CCP and CCC to do that video. We appreciate that. And guys, Burns got off, I believe, to the 6-0 lead, and then from that point on, it was all Kings Mountain, Coach.
Yeah, and Kings Mountain's defense is and I know that Burns scored a good many points, 3 touchdowns, but Kings Mountain's defense is going to be tough. They may have the best defensive front in the county. Burns was fortunate to jump out to an early lead, and but it's going to be all Kings Mountain after that.
Paul, Kings Mountain primarily ran the ball, Burns primarily ran the ball against Crest the week before. I think only 2 pass attempts in the game. A little bit more in terms of throwing the ball on Friday night against the Mountaineers. I think 13 passes was the total. You already seen in the highlight package there, a long touchdown pass for the Bulldogs, but still Burns looks to be a little bit one-dimensional on offense.
Yeah, I certainly noticed that, and that's what we were thinking was their bread and butter. You mentioned the passing game, and they needed that to get the points that they did against Kings Mountain. They passed for 168 on the night, 100 yards as a team overall rushing, which usually is not the case so far this season. But as Guy already said, Kings Mountain in particular has got a pretty good defense.
Coach, Kings Mountain was able to be balanced. Vaughn with 163 yards receiving, including that long touchdown that we just saw, and Josiah Hill, 4 touchdown rushes on the night to go along with about 150 yards on the ground. So if you can get your running back going for 150 and 4, that's a tremendous fantasy line, but that's a really good night for a high school running back.
Yeah, and there's not many teams that are going to be able to line up and deal with that kind of production, because that's going to be keep away. Your offense is going to be standing on the sideline. If they've got a running back that can rush for 150 yards and 4 touchdowns, it's going to be a long night for your defense.
Well, we saw Vaughn with another catch there. Paul, he's just one of these kids that, I mean, he's like, I don't know, I pass him in the hall. He's like 6'3", 6'4", stout, just looks like a stud. And he's proven that on Friday night. If Armstrong can get that ball anywhere close to him, he's making a tremendous catch.
Yeah, and just a quick note to viewers, David is the longtime Shelby High principal that has retired at a very young age and is helping over at Kings Mountain right now when he says he passed.
Well, thanks for telling my business, Paul.
No, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that from but just having fun with you, David. No, Vaughn's been incredible. He now's at almost 400 yards in receiving, 5 touchdowns, and they've got a lot of people they can go to through the air, but he definitely is going to be your number 1 guy.
Coach, I mean, Kings Mountain lost that first game to Shelby, and they have bounced back with 2 good wins.
Yes.
And are set now to get on into the Big South play, and they're in pretty good shape now at 2-1.
Yeah, and hats off to Shelby. Evidently, it was the best game that they've played was against Kings Mountain right out of the gate. So, at Kings Mountain, I think they just needed. Again, we've talked about this week after week. Kings Mountain needed to get that proven quarterback or get some snaps under center and get the game flow. And now that they have that, they're starting to find out what their identity is on the field, which is a good mix of run and pass. We've all said it before. A good run game helps the pass game.
Absolutely. Paul, meanwhile, Burns, and we see the final there, 41-20, Kings Mountain, the victory. Burns, after the early win against Forest View, back-to-back county games, back-to-back losses against Crest and Kings Mountain, they're going to need to look to get well against Alexander Central. We'll talk about that in our second segment. But that sets them up then to get into conference play. And, of course, we know about the conference play.
We do. If you're Burns in particular, you don't want to lose to both county rivals, but it is early in the season. A lot to learn, a lot to build on, and again, it's going to come down, I think, to more of a combination, not just relying totally on the run for the Burns Bulldogs.
All right, so 41-20 the final. He already threw that graphic up, so sorry about that, Tim. But Kings Mountain, the big win over Burns. Now let's talk about, there it is again. Good job, Tim, thank you. Let's talk about that Crest-Shelby matchup. This one was all Crest, 27-0 at halftime. And, Coach, the thing that impressed me about the McSwain kid at quarterback for Crest, first time I had gotten a chance to see him, was the third down conversion. Shelby did a nice job on first and second down, and Crest in that first half seemed to be in a third down and 9, third down and 8, third down and 11, a lot, and McSwain kept converting on third down, and obviously it paid dividends for the Chargers in that first half.
Yeah, and I think he's starting to figure out which receivers he wants to make his combination to. There's a great run by Carson right there in the screen pass. But, yeah, you're right. He did complete a lot of big plays. That was good coverage right there and put it into place that only his receiver could catch the ball.
Paul, he mentioned Aiden Carson there. He goes in for the touchdown. That's the bread and butter for Crest as far as their running game concerned. I think he's in his third year of getting quite a bit of playing time. Of course, he's the starter this year. And obviously, again, talking about balance on offense, you don't want to be too heavy one way or the other, and Carson is definitely going to be their guy on the ground.
He certainly is, and he's certainly the leading rusher and more touchdowns than anybody on the team so far. But then when it comes to putting it through the air, while Crest has got several guys to go to, nobody excites you more than Michael Edwards. He's that kind of player, and we've seen that at Burns and Shelby and all of our schools at one point, that athlete who does so much after the catch.
No question about that. Now switching scenes over to Shelby. Land Farmer, couple of interceptions on Friday night, fumble late. Really, the situation with Shelby as far as putting themselves in a position to win the football game, whether it was against Crest on Friday night or AC Reynolds the week before, you got to take care of the football. And the Golden Lions turned it over on their first possession, got behind by 2 touchdowns, and really were playing behind the 8 ball the rest of the game.
Yeah, and that's frustrating, I know, for Coach Wilbanks as well as Land, is that there was a number of sacks. There were a number of, like I say, a couple of interceptions, a fumble. It was just a tough first half for Shelby. And until they can get through that, and they've got to work through these trying times and get a couple of scores on their end of the scoreboard first, I think this is going to be a struggle for them, because a lot of times you'll get into a position where what's going to happen now or what's going to happen next. So there's a mental aspect of it that's got to change for the Golden Lions.
The fumble right there was basically what ended the chances on the night for Shelby. The Golden Lions were at least had gotten it within a couple of touchdowns. Paul, and were driving, trying to make it a 1-score game when that turnover happened, and it pretty much ended the ball game. But again, we talk about penalties. I think Shelby ended up with 85, 90 yards in penalties, and they had the multiple turnovers. Those are the kinds of things that, and I know we're getting ready to get in that conference, and I'm, what I think about the conference that Shelby and Burns get to play in. But they got to clean that kind of stuff up.
They really do, and going outside of those things that you got to do to help your football team go forward, get past your own mental mistakes and too many penalty flags. Going back to Land Farmer for Shelby, this is a talented young quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
He only now, as a starter, his second year, and he can be around another season because he's just a junior. One of the things he ran into, David and Guy, that I don't think he'll do on a regular basis, especially with that conference season coming up, is athletes that Crest defense could put on him. Even though he's bigger in size, they were swarming him and got some sacks that you're not going to usually see Farmer take because he's big and he can be elusive. And then for him, he had a couple of overthrows. He was just right over the outreach of Foster and Thompson, the wide receivers. If they would have made a couple of those, it would have at least, I think, been a 27-21 game. And like you said, Shelby could have tightened it up in that fourth quarter at least.
Final score in that one, Crest wins the, I guess we're going to call it the, what was the tailor-made trophy was announced on Friday night for John and Jim Taylor, and it's a bell. I don't know that I was happy about the fact that it was a bell, but needless to say, Crest. And I don't know if they rang it after the game or not. They definitely should have. I didn't hear it, but needless to say, 27-14, the final score. Big win for the Chargers, and now of course Crest at 2-0. They'll get to see Charlotte Catholic. Shelby will get to see Olympic, and we'll talk about both of those games on our next part of the show. After this timeout, you're watching Armchair Quarterback.
Education is our most powerful tool to improve and change our world. Hi, I'm Rhonda Benfield, your host for School Matters. Join me for a new program every other week with information from and about the students and staff of Cleveland County Schools. Discover what our schools are doing to challenge students and help them reach their full potential. You can catch us on Spectrum Cable Channel 19 or stream us live on c19.tv.
Probably not. I have to study for my exams next week, and my dad would kill me.
I can't make it. I've got a big game tomorrow night. I want to make sure I'm in good shape.
No, I'm good. I don't want to get in trouble. My parents would kill me.
Nah, I gotta fill out scholarship applications.
Everyone has at least one good reason to stay away from drugs and alcohol. Find your reason today and get back to enjoying life.
Welcome back in for our second half of Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen, joined by Coach Guy Suttle and Paul Foster. This week, we're talking about our upcoming games for our teams, and let's start with the Burns Bulldogs going to take on Alexander Central. This has been a good game for Burns the last few years. They've been able to get out early on Alexander Central, and despite the two back-to-back tough losses to their Cleveland County opponents, Coach, I suspect that we'll see Burns get well a little bit on Friday night against Alexander Central.
Yes, I think that probably the speed of the two games that Burns has played in the county with Crest and Kings Mountain is going to pay dividends this Friday going up against an Alexander Central team that is, I know they're 2-1, but I just think the speed of the game has been much faster for Burns over the last 2 weeks than what Alexander Central has seen.
Well, and as we have documented for however many years we've been running this show, about 25 years now, I'll put up a 1-2 Cleveland County team against a 4-0 team, 3-0 team, or wherever, any Friday night, just about any time, Paul. And I would say the same again. 1-2 versus 2-1. I'm taking Burns all day long.
Yeah, when you look at the schedules to begin the season in particular for all of these teams, but Burns is no different. You're playing quality opponents. You're playing those county rivals. So even if somehow the record was worse than what we're seeing, we're going to go with Cleveland County to be the favorite on Friday night.
Coach, I know that Burns threw the ball considerably more against Kings Mountain than they had against Crest. I feel like that's something that they'll work on as the season continues. Especially Friday night, I think they'll probably be more balanced against Alexander Central. Mm-hmm. And then obviously in that 1A portion of the Southern Piedmont Conference schedule, I mean, they can be as balanced as they want to be against those guys.
Yeah, and I think, Burns is not going to see a defensive front as good as Kings Mountain's, which may have changed their game plan a little bit. Against Crest, they were definitely running the football and doing it well. This past Friday night, throwing the ball a little bit more, but that may have been contributed to Kings Mountain's front four. So, you have to kind of move on from there. I will say that against Alexander Central, they will be more balanced. They're going to do whatever it takes to get back in the win column, but if that means running the ball, twice as much as they do throwing the ball, that's what Burns will do.
moving our attention now over to the Crest Chargers, 2-0 on the season, and they, I tell you what, Paul, they got rid of Gaffney in the season opener, and they jumped on some Charlotte Catholic. That's typically not a team that you, take lightly, that's for sure, because Charlotte Catholic has had some really dogfight type of games against Kings Mountain and Crest over the last several years in the playoffs.
Yeah, I remember going back a number of years ago now, one of those playoff games, Crest went into Charlotte Catholic. It was one that Crest survived and went on. And I tell you what, they're serious about football like we are in Cleveland County over at Charlotte Catholic. I don't know how this Charlotte Catholic team is compared to some other seasons when they've been so strong and competed for state championships, but you know they continue to bring in a number of top athletes, so we don't need to be in any way thrown off by that 1-1 record. It's going to be one of the tough challenges that Crest is going to face all season on Friday night.
Coach, the one thing you're going to get with Charlotte Catholic, they're going to be well coached, they're going to be disciplined, all those kinds of things that you expect from a team like Charlotte Catholic, and I think Crest will have to play a good ball game in order to beat them. I don't think that's a team that you can just line up against like maybe Alexander Central and just know you're going to win.
Yeah, and the thing, I've watched a little bit of film through Max Preps on Charlotte Catholic. They beat South Meck and lost to Providence Day. So and neither score was close. In the loss, it was 27-9. I think Catholic kicked 3 field goals. In the win against South Meck, they just dominated them. So, and we know a little bit about Providence Day because of a number of athletes that have migrated to Providence Day. But Weddington beat them first game of the season in a very tight ball game. I believe it was like 13-7. So you can't really gauge. Looks like Charlotte Catholic. There's no mystery to what they're going to do. They're going to be in the 2 tight ends, 2 wings. Look a lot like South Point, except they don't run the triple option out of it. They run a power game out of that set. Then they spread it out, and every time they spread it out, and the quarterback gets out from under center, gets in shotgun, they throw the ball. So there's not a whole lot of deception in what they're going to do. If he's under center, they're going to run the football 9 out of 10 times. They may have a play action pass out from under center, and then when they go shotgun, they're going to throw the ball, and they may run the draw. So I mean, there's not a whole lot. It's going to be line up, and here we come, and let's just see who's going to win, athlete versus athlete. There is a receiver, a slot receiver for Charlotte Catholic that played at Crest last year. King Rhodes is a receiver for Charlotte Catholic. Like I say, they don't throw the ball very much, but if they want to balance up, they did against South Meck. Nothing against South Meck, but they didn't. That was not quality competition like they're going to see this Friday.
He only watched a little bit of tape, Paul. He went over 2.5 minutes on a little bit of tape. Good job, Coach. Thank you. All right, let's get on. Kings Mountain's got a bye this week. They're open, and then Shelby is at Olympic. Olympic 3-0, Charlotte. Teams, typically you never know, Paul, and this is one of those things where you see that 3-0 out there beside Olympic, and you got to be like this. But again, I said I'll take a 1-2 Cleveland County team against a 3-0 Charlotte team any day of the week.
Yeah, everybody that's talked about that game going to Olympic has kind of said, wow, Olympic's unbeaten, because we're not used to seeing that. And there's a lot of schools in Charlotte, but when it comes to a football power, that's not been consistent with Olympic. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But I'm like you, David. I think Shelby's wanting to get back to true Shelby football and make up for those mistakes that I know they feel like cost them in that Crest game.
Well, no doubt they got to take care of the football and establish Tristan Tate. Tate had 120 yards, I guess it was, in the win against Kings Mountain, and has been in the 45 to 50 yard range against both AC Reynolds and Crest. So there's all the teams, or 3 of the games for this coming week. You got Alexander Central at Burns, Charlotte Catholic at Crest, Shelby at Olympic, and of course I mentioned Kings Mountain is open this week. Let's go ahead and talk a little college football. Gardner-Webb, wow, how about, 13-6, they lose to JMU, and JMU had to hold them on 4th down in the red zone as Gardner-Webb was trying to tie it up late in the 4th quarter. That was not something I saw coming. If you'd asked me that one, I would have said JMU by a couple of touchdowns, Coach. And instead, Gardner-Webb really doing a nice job hanging around and making that game close.
And James Madison is a quality opponent.
No
we
question.
know all about James Madison with Coach Houston, who's no longer there anymore. But just a quality program, and like I say, they had to hold them on fourth down to secure a win for James Madison. So my hat's off to Gardner-Webb and bouncing back after the Wofford game and really playing some good football there.
Absolutely. So get a chance to go out to Spangler Stadium and check out the Bulldogs this season. Again, they're 0-2 at this point, but a couple of very, very 1-point game and a 6-point game, or well, I guess Saturday was a 7-point game, but right there at the end with a chance to tie it up, possibly even go for 2 and get the win. ACC football, Carolina wins again. They beat Charlotte, but I'm kind of the opinion that after North Carolina Central next week, the Tar Heels might be in trouble, Coach.
Yeah, it may be. You really think against Charlotte, and I know watching a little bit of the game there that they dominated Charlotte, but you just like to see them put up more points, really. I mean, and I know the quarterback he's on scholarship too, though.
Speaking of more points, 35-0 in the first quarter, 56-13 at halftime, and I think 66 was the total number for the Clemson Tigers over Appalachian. Appalachian is not a typical let's beat them by 50 team, and Clemson pretty strong on Saturday night.
I think Dabo and his guys had something to say. They had taken all of those punches in the gut, so to speak, about how they played against Georgia, their quarterback play, their defense. We could go on and on. The quarterback did an outstanding job. I mean, what did he hit? His first 10, 12 passes. They came out to play, and like you said, David, App State always puts a quality program on the field, so certainly something to build on. They're going to meet much tougher opponents. They've got a long way to go, but it's good. They've got to feel better about themselves after what happened with Georgia.
No question about that. Yeah.
It just tells you how good Georgia is. Also, when somebody can come out and dominate a Clemson team that hangs 66 on another Division I team.
Well, and I was saying today that you're talking about the difference between maybe the number 1 team in the country in Georgia and I don't know where Clemson is, maybe 15, 18, and then how much Clemson is better than Appalachian and probably about the same distance in the rankings between them. That's pretty impressive. NC State in the Dukes Mayo Bowl on Saturday night, or not the bowl, but the preseason whatever against Tennessee, and unfortunately for the Wolfpack fans, the doubts or the concern that they may have had in that game against Western Carolina for 3 quarters, boy, it surely showed out against the Vols on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I don't think that was a surprise. I mean, after Western played with them, was winning in 3 quarters, to see Tennessee come out and do what they did. I think it's just a testament to the SEC also. Not sure where the ACC is going to fall this year. And I'm sure you'll mention the Notre Dame game here in just a little bit. But I'm not sure where the ACC is, and that was a big stumble.
Well, mentioning other teams in the ACC, Notre Dame, a huge upset, Northern Illinois. They were favored by 3 touchdowns, and Northern Illinois upset them. Duke beat Northwestern this week. Wake Forest dropped a 1-point decision. Then a lot of the other guys, Virginia Tech and some of those were playing teams that they should have beaten by 40, and they did. So it's just hard to see at this point exactly where the ACC is going. I mean, Miami might be the best team in the conference right now. We'll just have to wait and see how that goes. Under the 5-minute mark here, so let's talk about it. 47-10 on Sunday afternoon. The Panthers looked every bit as bad as they did last year when they went 2-15 and qualified for the number 1 pick in the draft, who is now quarterbacking the Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams. Paul, I mean, what can you say? There's not much positive to take from that game at all yesterday against the New Orleans Saints.
That took me right back to what last season was like. It was gut-wrenching to watch because you kept saying, I want to see some improvement somewhere for the Carolina Panthers. So, we go through having a head coach to an interim coach before last season's over. We've got the brand new group in, and nothing's changed. Now, it was game number 1, but it was so tough. It made New Orleans look like they were a Super Bowl contender when, in all honesty, guys, they're right in the middle of what is the overall best teams of the NFL right now. Now, they may show us a lot more going forward, but what I'm concerned about is not only how bad the offense and the quarterback still looks, but I even thought our defense, if anything, there were times when New Orleans could run the ball anywhere they wanted to, but when they went to the outside corners, one thing I noticed is a lot of time it was as if the Carolina Panther tacklers were waiting on the running back to come to them. I didn't even see any aggressiveness to get to New Orleans and to bring them down. We made it much too easy, and if it continues like that, Carolina they won't beat anybody.
Well, Guy, I mean, I know you're loving the offensive line play, but I mean, you trade your best player on defense. Brian Burns was definitely their best player. I mean, by a significant margin. And you get rid of him, you get rid of your best corner, you get rid of Frankie Louvu, who's probably their best linebacker. I mean, no wonder they're bad on defense.
Yeah, and you just cannot blame it all on the offensive line. Although that was bad. It was a total team effort in that loss. And there was nothing to hang your hat on or to say, I don't know it, and I know the pro game is so much different because you are dealing with professionals. They're going to be with you for years unless you say you trade them away. But how do you go in front of that group on Monday and say, okay, guys, we're going to gear this thing up and do a lot of improvement, and we'll be ready for this coming Sunday? I mean, it's got to be a tough film room for them also, especially, like I say, all the changes that they had in the off season and what they did in the spring, summer, and fall, or early summer workouts, and to come out and just look that bad.
All the national games as far as this first weekend went, I thought Kansas City looked really good against Baltimore, but Baltimore looked good as well. Then on Friday night, although I don't like the NFL playing on Friday night, you had Green Bay and Philadelphia. Philadelphia with Saquon Barkley now in the mix looked extremely good. Jordan Love hurt for the Packers at quarterback. That's going to put a question mark for them for the next 3 or 4 weeks while he recovers from that. Then you had the Sunday afternoon, the Sunday 4 o'clock game was the Cowboys and the Browns. Dallas looked really good. Cleveland looked really bad. And then the Sunday night game, which was the Rams and the Lions, I thought both of those teams looked like potential Super Bowl contenders from the NFC, with Detroit coming up with that overtime victory. So those were my takeaways from those 4 big national games. Anything from the 1 o'clock games outside of the Panthers that you thought was interesting as far as the NFL, Paul?
The only thing that I remember right offhand was I thought for a little bit Buffalo was going to lose game 1, and they found a way. And that's when you've got good veterans, that's important, and they did so.
No question.
I was surprised with Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean,
terrible on offense, but they figured out a way to win. They certainly 143 yards of total offense, and they pulled out a 17-point comeback. It's unbelievable, but that was on Tennessee. So there you go. Hey, we've run out of time. We'll talk about it next week right here on Armchair Quarterback.